Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us tonight for our 2025 Ironman Lake Placid course preview and pre-race tips. I am Coach Jennie Hansen of QT2 Systems. So a little bit about myself. I've been a QT2 coach athlete since 2012. I've been a triathlon coach since 2013 and started working as a coach with QT2 in 2020-ish. I'm an upstate New York, Finger Lakes area native, so I've been lots of experience with Ironman Lake Placid. It's kind of our closest thing we get to a hometown Ironman. I am a former professional triathlete, and then time happened, so I'm now a current age group triathlete. I'll be out there competing. I have 24 past Ironman finishes, and a quarter of them have been Ironman Lake Placid. So I've kind of had every experience on that course and seen a lot of different variations of it. I've also just geographically where I am, I always, end up with a handful of athletes racing at Ironman Lake Placid. It's probably one of my favorite races to coach athletes through. And way back in the day, I won Ironman Lake Placid in 2013. All right. So a little bit about our presentation. We're going to go through our QT2 Systems 5 Cornerstones, and then we're going to apply them, kind of walk you through these final few weeks heading into the race. We'll talk a little bit about some of the pre-race logistics and check-in logistics. We'll kind of touch on the day before and race morning, some of the things to do. And then we'll get through the nuts and bolts of the course and talk about how to go about pacing and fueling with that. All right, so just a review for those who don't know our QT2 Systems 5 Cornerstones. They are training, pacing, restoration and day-to-day nutrition, fueling, and mental fitness. All right, so these final few weeks, we're kind of getting to the point where people are starting to finish up some of their hard training in these next couple of weeks and then start to taper, the final 2 to 3 weeks into the race. This is when we'll be getting in our final key race specific sessions and then taking the rest of the sessions pretty easy. We want to try to simulate race conditions and intensities during training. So for Lake Placid, we'll get more into this, but this can include things like lake swimming, bike climbing and descending, and some sustained flats. You really want to try to get off the trainer, get outdoors, get used to those hilly routes, and then get in some hilly runs. Be prepared for any weather conditions, and Ken and has done everything in Placid. I mean, I think it's hot everywhere right now, so we know that that can be a weather condition. It also can be, 47 degrees and raining in the morning. It can run the whole gamut. Typical day, usually it's pretty cool in the morning. Usually there's a shower that passes through at some point, and then it usually often will clear up in the afternoon and get kind of warm and humid, but it can and will do anything. If you can, train on the course. If you can get up to Lake Placid, that's perfect. And you want to do kind of a dress rehearsal, ride and run, just sort of test your gear, make sure everything's working, make sure your helmet's comfortable, all of that. In these final few weeks, you want to train at your race targets. So things, whatever you're using to pace the race, whether that's heart rate, rate of perceived exertion, pace or power, really try to dial that in and get a feel for that. In the final couple of weeks, probably about like after 10 to 14 days out, that's when you stop getting fitness gains and you want to focus more on frequency and feel, kind of dial that in. You don't want to overtrain or panic train. Always want to err on the side of recovery. I had many times where I've had athletes, pick up a little bug or something in the final couple of weeks and it ends up benefiting them because it ends up leading to more recovery. It's more important to be rested than to be sharp, particularly with a long event like this, and include some days off or some days where you don't use your legs, some swim only days. In terms of nutrition and restoration in these final weeks, each day really aim to get at least half your body weight in ounces in addition to what is lost during workouts, especially on these hot days. And also getting some electrolytes as well. Aim for nutrient dense meals, 4 servings each of fruits and vegetables a day. The day prior to your long run or long ride, you want to get in a replenishment meal that's kind of high in carbs and low in fat. Make sleep a priority as best you can. I mean, no, that's not always possible, but you want to try to get 7.5 to 8 hours most nights. Take your anti-inflammatory measures, so your omega-3s, make sure you're hydrating and reducing stress and aiming for that sleep. Taper down caffeine, target less than 800 milligrams a week to be more receptive to it on race day. And don't forget to drink your recovery drink after workouts. This is not the time to be running any sort of energy deficit. You want to make sure you're replenishing your stores after your key sessions. All right. In terms of race week, you want to eat a relatively normal diet. So I know the temptation is, it's taper week. You feel like you're not doing as much. Don't cut back, though. Try to keep your normal diet going. If it's hot, add your extra salt to meals. Hydration is a focus. Drink plenty of fluid, sports drink or water for the 3 days leading up to the race, in addition to what is lost from workouts. Continue to taper down the caffeine intake with none on the day prior to race day, especially for a full. You'll thank yourself for this. It's kind of miserable at the time, but it really does increase receptivity on race day. You want to start your carb load a couple nights before the race. So that's when you want to have like your really heavy like pasta dinner, that kind of stuff, 2 nights before. And then the day before the race, have a really carb heavy, apologies for the barking dog, have a really heavy carb breakfast. So you're topping off your liver glycogen, your muscle glycogen, or kind of this 2 nights before and morning the day before. So it's and then your stomach has time to clear, so it's not upset race day. Continue to make sleep a priority and stay off your feet as much as possible. I mean, there's definitely some race check-in and all that has to go on, but otherwise don't go out of your way to be like touring town and walking all over the place. In terms of fueling, this is when you want to fuel in accordance with your race plan every session. So use the products you plan to use on race day, train your gut for race day, and then use a recovery drink afterwards. So on race day, fueling may be, especially for a full Ironman, fueling may be the most important and most likely limiter on performance, but it's one that you have a lot of control over. So you really want to be making sure on these final few key sessions that how your stomach is able to accept your race fuel and does well with it at race intensities. In terms of mental fitness, I know it's easy to kind of get caught up in these final few weeks and start worrying about the race, but try to reduce the external pressures as best as you can. No matter what happens, the sun will still come up, your family will still love you, you'll go back to work the next week and everything will keep going on as normal. So, reduce those external pressures as best as you can. Focus on what you can control, which is your attitude and your fueling. You want to trust your preparation and your training, kind of begin visualization. So you want to imagine, crossing that finish line, having a great day, what that looks like, and then how you'll respond if something goes differently. I mean, that's when you draw on your training, how have you responded when you haven't felt great in a run, or if you've gotten a flat tire during a bike, have that in your mental toolbox as well. You want to list your goals and targets. So goals, again, are those things you have total control over. So really that's your attitude, how you respond to adversity, that kind of stuff, and your fueling. I mean, stomachs can go south on race day no matter what, but you pretty much have control over your fueling plan. And then you'll list out your targets. So these are going to be your number space things. So, I want to ride 160 watts, or, I want to run X pace on the run. These are the targets that you have some control over, but again, it'll depend on what your body gives you on the day and also the conditions on the course. And enjoy the feeling of extraordinary fitness and be grateful. I mean, just being ready for an Ironman in and of itself is pretty remarkable. All right, so in terms of some pre-race logistics, you want to make sure you read through that athlete guide, read through the race details, make sure you've kind of started to plan that all out in your head. Get your bike tuned up, make sure nothing is going wrong on race day. Start making lists of, what you need swim, bike, run, pre and post race, and purchase any needed items, especially nutrition-wise. You want to make sure you have the correct goggles, which if it's a sunny day, you might want tinted goggles for this course. You want to make sure you're charging and replacing batteries, packing, confirming your reservations, and kind of plan out your race check-in time when you're going to go to a pre-race briefing and when you want to check your bike gear in on Saturday. All right, so some of the specifics on that. The athlete check-in is going to be at the Lake Placid Conference Center at 2634 Main Street. Transition is at the Olympic Oval. So the conference center is just kind of a little bit up the street towards town from the Olympic Oval. It's kind of next to there's the Crown Plaza, the big hill that comes down from the Crown Plaza, and then the conference center is right there. Athlete check-in is on Thursday and Friday from 9 p.m. to 5 p.m. And then there's a few hours Saturday morning, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., just in case something happens to happen. You'll need your active.com registration QR code, have that pulled up on your phone before you get in line, and a photo ID. Ideally, try to get to the expo early, get to check-in early, limit your time there. If you can, coincide your check-in with a mandatory athlete briefing. Mandatory bike check-in and bike run gear bag drop off is on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's not a huge window, so make sure you are planning that out. The athlete briefings, those are going to be just down the road from where the check-in. They'll be at Olympic Oval in transition. That's where all the tents and vendors will be. So those athlete briefings are Tuesday at 2 and 3 p.m., Friday at 12 and 3 p.m., and then there's one on Saturday at 11 a.m. In terms of what you'll get when you check into the race, so you'll get your race bib number that is worn on the run, doesn't need to be worn on the bike. You'll get stickers. You'll get one for the bike frame, one for the bike stem, one for the helmet, and then you'll get a bunch of them for your gear bags, which we'll go through. You'll get your swim cap. You'll get a bike checkout ticket, which you can give to a family member or a friend if you can't check your bike out yourself, or if it's just an Ironman and you're tired and don't want to go back for it. You'll get your athlete wristband that needs to be worn all weekend to get you into transition and all over the place. You will get 5 gear bags. So again, we'll go through this more, but you'll get, for an Ironman, you'll get a morning clothes bag. You'll get bags for your bike gear and your run gear. And then you'll get special needs bags for your bike and run. Check your packet. Usually IRONMAN Lake Placid gives a $25 restaurant voucher to any, there's a list of restaurants that can be used in time. So don't just kind of chuck out all those extra papers that come in the backpack, look through them. There's usually a restaurant voucher in there. And at this race, your timing chip will be picked up at check-in. There'll be a timing table. So you'll get direct there, but just make sure you don't leave check-in without your timing chip, because you'll get it at check-in, not at bike drop-off. All right, so about those gear bags, if you've never done an Ironman before, this might be new to you. Morning clothes, if you've done a 70.3, you've gotten this. This is kind of everything you want immediately post-race, and then you'll stick whatever you wear in the morning before you line up for the swim into this bag. You'll drop it off race morning near the swim start, and then this will be available kind of right after you finish at post-race from 3 p.m. to midnight by athlete food. So whatever you put in there, you can get back right away. Your bike gear bag, this is where you're going to put everything that you need for the bikes. This will be your helmet, your shoes. For IRONMAN Lake Placid, you have to put your shoes in the bag. You can't leave them on the bike. It's not a safe, coming out of transition, it's not safe to be trying to screw around, put your shoes on. So they have to go in the bag. You have to put them on in T1. If you wear socks on the bike, those will go in that bag. Any sunglasses, if you have any gels or anything you want to shove in your race kit, that would go in this bag. If you plan to reapply sunscreen before you get on the bike, if it's a chilly morning and you want to put on some extra layers when you get on the bike, everything you wear on the bike will go into this bag. This will get dropped off when you drop off your bike at check-in on Saturday. There'll be a specific area you'll bring that bag. Race day, you'll kind of grab this bag, you'll run into the changing tents. I'll have a picture of that in a minute. You'll change into your bike gear. You'll put all your swim gear, so your wetsuit, goggles, cap, into the bike gear bag, and then you'll kind of come out of the changing tent. There'll be a place to hand off that bike gear bag, so make sure all your swim equipment is in there securely. And then that bag will be brought back. A volunteer will eventually bring that bike bag over to your bike, and you can pick it up with your bike after the race. Your orange bag is going to be your bike special needs or bike personal needs bag. So this is I'll go through this a little bit more, but there'll be a bike special needs station about halfway through the bike. So anything you think you might want to pick up halfway through the bike, you can put into this bag. So this would be, more gels, more bars, any extra nutrition, some bottles if you plan to bring your own drink mix and swap it out. I usually put like another spare tube or a CO2 cartridge in there just in case. The nice thing about IRONMAN Lake Placid is that you can get these bags back Monday morning. So you're not, a lot of races, you just kind of, you don't grab it, you lose it. But IRONMAN Lake Placid, you can get these bags back. This will be dropped off race morning, kind of behind transition. I have another map of that on Cummings Road near Herb Brooks Arena. And then you can pick up again Monday morning at 11 a.m. They won't be kind of manned overnight, but they'll be sitting there where you dropped it off. Then your red bag will be your run gear bag. So kind of like the bike gear bag, this is where you'll put everything you need for the run. You can have your race belt and number will have to go in there. Run shoes, obviously, if you want new socks, reapply sunscreen, nutrition, any hat or visor, any clothing you plan to wear. If you're getting out later on the course and you want a headlamp, this you will drop off again at bike check-in on Saturday. There'll be another place to leave your run gear bag. And same thing, sort of during the race, you'll pick up your run gear bag, go into the changing tent. Your bike gear will go into the run bag after you take everything out of it. And then when you come out of the changing tent, you'll drop it off before leaving T2 and heading on the run course, and you'll pick it up with your bike after the race. And then finally, you have your black run personal needs bags, your special needs. So this is something if you want to put, extra clothes because it can get cool at night, fresh socks, any sort of nutrition and goodies, bottle refills. I made the mistake of trying to wear new shoes on race day last year, but thankfully I had put my old shoes in my run special needs bag because that ended up needing to happen. Again, this will be dropped off race morning from 4:30 to 6 a.m. at Mirror Lake Drive by the stone wall. So that's kind of a little bit past the swim start. Again, I'll show that in the next slide. And you can pick up again on Monday at 11 a.m. where you dropped it off. Also, the run and bike special needs, if you want to have a family member bring those to those areas for you race morning, that is possible as well, just so it's one less thing to take care of. Also, I recommend, bringing a Sharpie and writing your race number on there. If there's rain, those numbers can sometimes come off. They're not often, but it's good to have a little bit of backup. All right, so with those gear bag drop-offs, so this Brooks Arena, again, here's our transition. The arena is just kind of back here, just kind of behind the high school. So you'll just have to come out of transition, come up a little hill, drop it off there. It's not far. And then your run personal needs drop-off is kind of at this stone wall on Mirror Lake Drive, which is kind of over here somewhere. You'll see, again, this kind of line of stone. The personal needs area will be back here. And the swim starts here, so you have to kind of walk up Mirror Lake Drive a little bit, walk back, or have someone else drop it off for you. All right, so then kind of our check-in logistics. Here's just a couple pictures of transition. So during the race, you'll kind of, I think last year the gear bags were kind of like somewhere over here. Don't quote me on the run gear bag, but you'll come in from the swim, kind of grab your bag, run into the tent here, change, get all your bike gear on, come out of the tent, and then, you'll drop off that bag here, go through transition, grab your bike, come into bike out. And then when you bike back in, kind of you'll do the reverse and grab your run bag, go into the change tent, come out, drop off the bag, and head out onto the run course. All right, so the final checks the day before. You might want to do a short shakeout, run, bike, or swim, kind of whatever's on your training schedule, Friday or Saturday. There's a formal practice swim Saturday from 7:30 to 9 a.m. This you have to have your timing chip to go into, but you can swim in the lake at any time. It's always open. The buoy line's out. So it's just if you want to go to that specific time to have more people around you, you have to have your timing chip for it. When dropping off your bike and run gear, know your transition location. Take the time to really kind of look at how you run through transition, where you pick up your bag, where you drop off that bag, really make mental notes of that. You want to make sure you charge all your electronics and make sure your watch is charged, power meter, heart rate monitor. If you need to replace the battery, do that. Set out and organize your gear for race morning, confirm your morning logistics, and make sure your kit, your cap, your wetsuit, timing chip, all those things are out. I've left timing chips in rentals before and had to run back, and it makes for a stressful race morning. Get your sunscreen, get your bike bottles mixed and ready, have everything set. Make sure you've got your pre and post race clothing, kind of pack the post race clothing in that morning clothes bag, and any after race snacks you might need. I always need some sort of salty, cheesy, some chip or something that I'll throw in my morning clothes bag right afterwards. And again, just reiterating that the mandatory bike check-in is Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. All right, so race morning in terms of nutrition. So for breakfast, we recommend having just some simple carbohydrates, some fluid, electrolytes, and a small amount of protein. This is just giving your body what it needs on the day. You do not need any fat, fiber, or extra vitamins or minerals. It'll just kind of sit in the stomach, and it's not what your body needs while doing an Ironman. The core diet recommended breakfast is applesauce, banana, a scoop of protein powder, and sports drink. And ideally, try to complete eating about 3 hours prior to the race start. It is an early race start, so if you're not completely there, that's okay. But, just try to give it a couple hours to settle. And then sip on sports drink until the race start. Make sure you're topping that off. And then right about 15 to 20 minutes before the race start, top off with a gel before you get into the water, since you won't be fueling throughout that time. In terms of race morning parking, so There's not really very many places to park in town. It's strongly recommended that if you're not staying within walking distance, which a lot of rentals are within walking distance, but if you're staying outside of town, it's recommended that you park in the Spectator shuttle lots, which are West Valley Road, Lake Placid Elementary School, and Lake Placid Firehouse. These are all within a couple miles of transition. I mean, it's probably at most maybe a 10-minute shuttle ride. The shuttles run from 4:30 a.m. until 1 a.m. Mondays to get you back to your car. Transition is open early. It is open from 4:30 to 6 a.m. So again, race morning, look over transition again, kind of review the changing tents, review the bike out, review the run out. I don't remember whether or not you can get to your bike or run bags at this race morning. So that might be something to attend an athlete briefing and have them double check about. Apply sunscreen. It's a long day out there and sunburns hurt and are dangerous. Set up your bike. Be mindful of those around you. This picture was from my pro years, so you will not have nearly this much space. That is a luxury right there. You'll be pretty crammed in. There's not really much you need to put next to there's nothing really you need to put next to your bike, but pump up tires, put in nutrition, that kind of stuff. You'll want to make sure, again, to allow time to drop off your special needs and morning clothes bags and allow time to line up appropriately. Those corrals get pretty crowded, so you want to make sure you're there early. All right, so just kind of general course overview, and then we'll go into the details. Swim start is at the beach here. Team 1 and 2 are at the finish are at the Olympic Oval. The swim is a rolling start, self-seated based on estimated finish time. It's a 2-loop rectangular clockwise swim. Bike again also is 2 loops. I think everyone knows that there's a lot of climbing and descending and some flat portions. Mostly good road conditions. There's a couple patches that are rougher. And then the run is 2 loops. You kind of get some downhill, some flatter portions, then you return uphill, a couple out and backs. There's a mix of sun and shade on the course, and it can get hot and humid. All right, so looking at our swim course overview, at 6:18 a.m., the pro men will start. 6:22, the pro women will follow, and then the age group rolling start will begin at 6:30 a.m. So it's a lake swim in Mirror Lake. You've got your 2 loops with this kind of Australian exit of running out into the beach, running back in the middle of them. You will self-seed in start corrals, and you'll roll start as a beach start from the sand based on your estimated finish time. Water temperature will be announced race morning. Usually it's the low to mid 70s. It's every year except for I think 2011, it's ended up being wetsuit legal for pros or for amateurs, not for pros. Pros, it's usually not wetsuit legal. Wetsuits are permitted up to and including 76.1 Fahrenheit. But it's always in the days and weeks before. It usually kind of flirts with that mark. So you'll see readings above and below it. Ironman last year managed to find places that were lower than what the beach reading was. So, just kind of check in. They'll have a thing out that will say the water temperature just to give you an idea. So really be prepared for anything. This might not be a wetsuit swim. So you need to be prepared for that, not freaking out about it race morning. If it's over 76.1 and up to 83.8 degrees Fahrenheit, wetsuits are optional. You can still wear your wetsuit, but you won't be eligible for awards or world championship slots, and you'll start in a separate wave after everyone else. If you opt to not wear your wetsuit to be eligible for awards and slots, your swimwear must be textile. So you can't have anything neoprene in your swimwear. You can't wear floaty shorts. And nothing can extend past your elbows or knees. So the biggest catching point with this is if you plan to wear calf sleeves in a non-wetsuit swim, you have to put them on in T1. You cannot wear them in the water. All right, so in terms of going more into detail on the swim course, there can be some sun glare from the right kind of coming up over the mountains. Obviously, Lake Placid is kind of known for having a buoy line. So there's kind of a cable underneath the water along the line of the buoys the entire course. So, if you swim along the line, you don't really need to look up for the site for the buoys. So that makes it pretty popular. If you try to swim directly on the buoy line, expect contact. It will get rough on that. And you still need to watch for buoys because they are directly on this line. And if you're just head down swimming straight on the line, you'll smash right into a buoy. I've done that before and it kind of jars you a little bit. Buoys will be on the right every 100 meters. They'll be yellow for the first half of each loop, and then kind of orange for the second half of each loop. And there's three big red turn buoys, one at each end of the far course and one kind of down when you turn to come into the exit. From about 6:40 to 7:30 in the morning, pros are told to kind of stay inside the buoy line because they'll be coming through for their second lap, while age groupers will be getting through for their first lap. So this is going to be, it's an Ironman Pro Series race. It's probably going to have big competitive pro fields. Those men and women will be coming through like freight trains. Stay to the outside of the buoys. You don't want to get, swam over by 25 guys swimming 48-minute Ironman swims. The lake itself, this picture is kind of uncharacteristically choppy for the Mirror Lake. It's almost always calm. Sometimes it has a little bit of light chop like this picture on it, but it can get rough just due to the volume of people in it. It's not a very big lake. So when you've got 2,200, 2,500 bodies in it, it can get kind of rough and feel a little bit choppy. You also can get this sort of whirlpool effect because there are so many people sort of in this 1.2-mile loop. It sort of creates a little bit of a whirlpool and sort of pulls you along, which is nice. And then there's a long run to transition, which is carpeted. Okay, so just kind of another picture. You'll line up on the beach here. If it's a cold morning, the sand can get kind of cold on your feet. So just, if you tend to get frozen feet, you might want to bring a pair of throwaway socks. You'll enter through the arch here, kind of come through, start swimming. Here's where you'll come out and kind of run back through into start your second loop. It's pretty long straight away, pretty short at the far turn. And same thing coming back in, coming around the dock. This is part of the run from transition. There's again this sort of blue carpet all the way there, so you don't have to run on the pavement. If somebody loves you enough, they can capture really attractive pictures as well. All right, so this is a self-seated rolling start. Be realistic about your swim time. There's a lot of 75-minute swimmers lining up at 60 minutes last year. I'll just leave it at that. So be realistic. It's not a big lake. When you're coming around to lap people and you're trying to pass people and there's pros coming up on the inside, it can get pretty congested. So, this can be really alleviated if you are realistic about your swim time. You're not creating situations where people are trying to get around you while you're trying to lap other people and so on. Ideally, take the first couple 100 meters up tempo and then kind of settle into about a 7 to 10 RPE. If you're an anxious swimmer, though, just start conservative and build. It's a long day. You're not going to make or break your race in the first couple 100 of the swim. And so it's better not to spike the heart rate if you're kind of anxious about getting in the water or anxious about the race in general. You're going to get bumped or hit, so expect it. It's not a big lake. There's a lot of people in it. It's not intentional. Don't let it rattle you if people are bumping or hitting you or touching your feet, that kind of things. If you want less contacts, just stay wider left, stay further away from the buoy line, and you'll have a little bit clearer of a lake. Use the other swimmers for your benefit to draft and sight off of between the cable and just the buoys and the kind of the relatively straightforward nature of this lake. It's pretty easy to sight in this lake. Be prepared for lapping swimmers, kind of if you're depending on which end of the field you're on. Buoys, again, to keep them to your right, you have to keep the turn buoys to your right. If you get caught up on the left of a straightaway buoy, nothing's going to happen, but you have to keep the turn buoys on your right shoulder. Turns will be crowded. Stay wide, just be careful, watch for kicking feet and all that kind of stuff. And then try to increase the kick the last couple 100 yards to start preparing your legs for the run to T1. Just get that blood flow going so you're not getting lightheaded and dizzy coming out of the water. All right, moving on to our bike course. So here's just kind of our maps from Ironman. So bike course is kind of now like a big loop with a littler loop attached. There's been a lot of various versions of this bike course to make it the full distance with various out and backs, but this has been our course for the second consecutive year now. So obviously, you kind of start off with a little bit of climb, so relatively little rolling, then you get the kind of famous descent, then it stays a little flat, then you get kind of more rolling through this little loop here, and then there's a lot of climbing before you repeat. So let's break that down a little bit further. So it's 2 loops, 112. I mean, a lot of Garmin's end up reading 111, but semantics, miles at that amount of time. mostly good road conditions, and it's about 7,000 feet of climbing, kind of depending on the source. I think some of my athletes have read like 6,500, some have read a little over 7,000 last year, but it's, that amount of climbing doesn't really matter. You're going uphill for a while. If we break it down into different sections, I'll go through these. We've kind of got like transition to descent, then there's the descent portion, then there's the J flats, kind of going from Keene to Upper J. There's that new loop that got added last year. And then you'll kind of come up 86 to Wilmington, climb back up from Wilmington and back to Lake Placid, and go through town and repeat. So let's get a little more into that. So this first kind of transition to the descent portion, this is, about 12 miles of riding before you actually hit the descent. You want to, over these first few miles coming out of transition, be careful. There's some sharp turns. There's some, these are kind of down, turns are on a downhill. So you do not want to be blasting through here. This is kind of why you can't leave your shoes on the bike. There's these sharp downhill turns. A lot of times it rains in the morning, so these are often wet. And another place to be pretty heads up is really just kind of this first, like, probably 8-ish miles on Route 73. This is one of those areas when I said it's mostly good road condition. This is kind of a little bit of the exception. There's, some cracks in the road. There's some bumps. There's a lot of like the cold patch in there. So just be careful, be very heads up. If you go to pass somebody, give plenty of space because there might be a flaw in the road that they have to move over for that you don't see. So be heads up, don't be buried in your air bars, just, blindly running through here. Pay attention to the road here and you'll be fine. Then you'll get sort of the climb out of town is in this portion. So it's about a 400-foot climb over about 2.25 miles. So it's about a like 3-4% grade through here. It's not super steep. If you just look at it, it doesn't seem that bad. But when you actually start climbing it, it's got a little bit more bite than you realize. It just takes a little bit of time. Don't get carried away. It's super, super easy to get carried away in this portion, because you're fresh out of the water. I can't tell you how many times I've given this presentation and how many times I've gone out on that climb and I've either been cold or it's been crowded and I think I want space before I get to this descent and totally overcook this climb. So don't do that. It will catch up with you. And then also in this portion, you get this little single out and back on Mount Van Hovenberg. This is really nice, smooth road. There's an aid station. You kind of go through this little kind of like path loop with the aid station at the end of the loop, the out and back, and come back onto 73. And then you go kind of a little bit more, just kind of flat rolling up and down before you hit the descent. So our Keene descent is kind of one of the key features of this course. It's about 1,100 foot of elevation loss over about 4 to 4.5 miles. So it's about a -5% grade. There's kind of 3 distinct sections to it that are sort of demarcated by these truck signs. So when you see like the truck sign with, trucks, use caution for next 2 miles or whatever, then you're about to hit the portions of the descent. So the first section coming down the descent, it's been repaved over the past couple of years. It's in really nice road condition. The second section, it's, wasn't repaved that long ago. It's still in fairly decent condition, but it's got a little like some of those snowplow heaves in it. It's a little bit smoother in the tire tracks, and there's a few curves coming through there. I mean, now having raced in Europe, it's not really that bad, but you will have to, it's not a straight shot downhill. You have to turn your bike a little bit. And then the third section, it's again a little bit better road condition. You've got a little bit more kind of curving around here, coming down through this final section into Keene. It's possible to control your speed throughout the entire descent. So, if you're not comfortable going over like 30 to 35 miles an hour, you can control that. If you're a speed demon that likes to blast down at like 50 to 55 miles an hour, that is possible as well too. It's never too steep for brakes to work, especially disc brakes. If it's pouring rain and you have rim brakes, that's, a little bit less effective, but you can still control your speed. If you're more of a cautious descender, if you're someone that doesn't really like blasting down a hill, again, totally fine, but just stay further to the right. If you're a more confident descender, you leave space when passing. Don't, close past people, don't jar people. There's a lot of road to play with. You usually have like a lane and a half at least to play with when coming down the descent. Everything's pretty blocked off. So there's plenty of road to use. There's no reason to close past people. And so just be careful. Again, be prepared for any conditions. It can be, just nice, sunny, calm, or it can be super windy. I've been down it in torrential downpours before, but just stay controlled, stay calm. And then I think, the second lap, especially sometimes, kind of looking forward to it because it's a little bit of a breather after you've been climbing for a very long time. So just some pictures from the descent. This is kind of coming through the first portion here. It just, winds a little bit along the river. It's pretty visible. You can see where you're going. It's not super steep through here. It's very nice. And then these are just kind of some portions from the later part of the descent. I believe this is kind of one of your curves, kind of final curves coming down into Keene. You'll go around here, it'll drop off a little bit more, and then you'll get down into Keene Valley. All right, so then once you get down the descent, you hit this really kind of like nice, mostly flat to slightly downhill, a couple little ups, bumps in there portion on 9N till you hit the town of J. This is a little under 10 miles. It's usually a pretty fast portion of the bike. It's beautiful course section. There's a lot of nice river views, mountain views. It's a really good place to refuel and refill as well. Usually, when you're going down the descent, you're not necessarily thinking about getting in your fluids or your gels. So this is a good place to catch up on that. All right, so this new loop, which added a little bit to the slide because now that I raced this in the last year, I have seen this now and actually can speak to it. So this was changed last year. They took off the Hazelton out and back and added this little kind of loop through J, kind of going through some of these back streets, coming back on 9N. So this has some punch to it. These climbs, this highlighted portion is this little new loop. As you can see, it's not a lot of elevation in compared to some of what's to come, but it's got some pretty steep climbs in it and some steeper descents that are kind of around curves. It's about 500 feet of total climb. So it's not a ton, but it has some punch. This wooden bridge got a lot of attention last year. There's a lot of angst about it on the Ironman Facebook page, which there's a lot of angst about everything on the Ironman Facebook page, but it's you kind of come down this curve and then you go through this wooden bridge. I believe this Ironman make this a no passing zone. I think they had a no aero bar sign here. There's a little bit of like a lip coming onto this bridge, and then it's a wooden slab surface, and then there's some pylons on the other side. So it's an extremely short section. It takes maybe like 15, 20, 30 seconds to get through here. So just go slow. When you're coming down this kind of Glen Road towards this covered bridge, slow down. Don't overcook that corner. You can ruin your race by overcooking the corner. You will not ruin your race by going too slow through here. So just, be careful, and it's not a big deal at all. It's not going to puncture your tires. It'll be fine. Just go slow. And then you'll another place to use caution is just when you're coming back down to 9N, you'll be coming down to this curve on a descent. So again, be upright, be ready to turn there. All right, so after you go through your new loop, then you'll kind of make this right-hand turn and come up Route 86 here. So this is, as soon as you make this right-hand turn, you'll be coming up a steep climb here. So have your gearing ready, don't be grinding in a big gear when you make this right-hand turn because you'll immediately start climbing. It's a kind of a net uphill. You'll come up this kind of longer, steeper climb. It's a couple little downhill sections and then a little bit more climbing through here. About 5 miles total through here. It ends up taking a while because you're going kind of slow up this. It's about a couple 100 feet of elevation gain. These climbs, obviously the big climb up from Wilmington gets a lot of attention, but these are some of the more tougher ones, I feel like, on this course. If for whatever reason, this section of road, if it's a humid, steamy day, it just tends to trap heat the way it's arranged. So it can get kind of hot and humid on here, especially after you've kind of come through the descent, come through J, which are kind of faster portions of the course. And then you'll do this little loop kind of from 86 onto Bill Huber and Hazelton before coming back onto 86. This is just another place to be heads up because there are some rough patches of road through here. So again, just watch out for cracks, bumps, etc. All right, so finally then to finish up each loop, we have our climb from Wilmington to Lake Placid. So this is where the bulk of your elevation is going to come. Not all of it, obviously. It's about, 1,000 feet of elevation. gain over those final 11 to 12 miles. So it's not super steep. There's portions where it will kind of flatten out or turn into a little bit of false flats. You can get in your bars and relax a little bit in between the steeper pitches. I find it helps to sort of make note of some of the landmarks, especially in your first loop. So then your second loop, you have a little bit more of an idea of what's to come. So you go kind of past an A&W, there's a campground, there's a little bit steeper of a portion going past Flume Falls. One of the steepest portions on here is when you see the Whiteface Ski Resort sign. That's kind of one of the punchier sections through there. You'll go past High Falls Gorge where it flattens out a little bit. It's actually really pretty there. So it's a good place to kind of take a little breather and look around. You'll see kind of coming past these ponds, there's various trailheads to them. Some of these portions are climbing, some are a little bit flatter, again, nicer kind of places to relax. Then you'll come past River Road, you're part of your run course, you'll climb a little bit more, and then you'll hit the three bears, the Mama Bear, Baby Bear, and Papa Bear, which are, I mean, they're climbs. Papa Bear's a climb. They're not the worst climbs on the course by any point. It's just they're at the end of each loop. So, and there tends to be a lot of people on Papa Bear. So it's actually kind of fun to come up on that climb. There's no more out and back on Route 86 with the loop they added. Instead, you'll just turn right hand on Northwood Road here, which is more uphill after you just come uphill. And then you'll kind of make a nice little loop through town, go behind transition, behind the high school for special needs, and repeat. Going through town's a lot of fun. There's a lot of people out cheering all the time too. All right, so a couple pictures from the climb. This is kind of coming up past the campground here, kind of sort of just, gradual climbing, use your gears, spin out here. Don't grind yourself up. You don't need to. Again, this is kind of coming up another portion. I believe this is sort of coming up towards, I forget where this portion is, but again, kind of gradual uphill. This is one of the punchier portions coming up past the Whiteface Ski Resort here. And then finally, this is coming uptown onto Papa Bear here. Again, it's a decent climb. You'll feel it, but it's not the worst climb that you will ever face in your life. So just touching a little bit on bike special needs. I think, some of the nutrition changes on course, more and more people are using bike special needs now. So the way that works in Lake Placid is there will be a volunteer kind of at the base of this little hill here with a megaphone. You will call out your number, be loud, be clear. The volunteer will call out the number to the volunteers up at special needs. They will grab your bag out for you. A volunteer will be standing out there holding your bag, ideally. And you can just kind of pull off next to that volunteer, refill bottles, replace, do whatever you need to, and then just kind of hand the bag back, carefully pull back out and continue on. One note here is that there are no bathrooms at special needs. So if you're planning to stop for the bathroom, it won't be there. This is just where your bags are. Again, this, as you get more into the bell curve, it might get kind of crowded. So if it takes a volunteer a second to find your bag, be nice, be kind. Everyone's working their butts off here. So again, that's just, how that works. Just pull off, grab your stuff, be quick as you can, hand the bag back and get back on your way. I think last year took me maybe a minute and a half to just kind of replace bottles and continue on. All right, in terms of our race day bike fueling, there's 5 aid stations per loop, approximately every 10 to 15 miles. Hydration wise, they'll have water and Mortal Hydration, no longer any Gatorade product on course. They will have Morton gels, both caffeinated and non-caffeinated, Morton bars and bananas, or you can carry your own. Again, I've, kind of usually recommend to my athletes to carry their own, take 3 or 4 bottles and then replace them at special needs. It ends up working out well. New rules, again, we'll get to those. You can no longer put a bottle down the front of your race kit. Be heads up at aid stations. If you're not stopping, stay to the left. I mean, I give space. Probably it's a good idea usually to sit up just because there can be an errant bottle that gets dropped or starts rolling across the street. So be heads up. And then check the final athlete guide for on-course nutrition. In terms of our Morton gels, the black gels are non-caffeinated, the white are caffeinated. Morton gels don't have a lot of sodium. They only have about 22 milligrams versus, 100 to 200 in most other gels. The caffeinated gels are high in caffeine. They have 100 milligrams. Most other gels are like 20 to 25, maybe 50. So there's some that are 75 these days, but just know if you are taking a caffeinated gel, you're taking caffeine, and they have kind of this hydrogel consistency for absorption. In terms of bike equipment, for the most athletes, a tri-bike will be the best choice. And it's not, the road bike is not a wrong choice by any means if that's what you're more comfortable in, because there is a lot of climbing on this course. But there are also a lot of prolonged, relatively flat stretches, and the climb does flatten out in areas. So there's plenty of places to get into the bars, and it's just nice not to be weight bearing through your arms throughout extended the entire day. If you've trained on hills and you're comfortable with your gearing and crank length, there's no need to change it. There's a couple of steeper sections on that new loop, but they're pretty short. Most of the climbing is kind of at that moderate to light 3 to 5% grade. With that, I will say having a 28 plus tooth option on the rear cassette is nice. I had a 32 added to my cassette last year after the race, and I will definitely be using that this year. Wheel choice will depend on wind and comfort and experience. So again, with this course, the forecast in Lake Placid town itself is not always indicative of what's going to be going on the rest of the course. This is mountains. It can be very different in town versus in Keene. So just be prepared that, check the forecast a few different places. Be prepared that even if it says a light wind in town, it still could be windy on the course. So prepare that with your comfort and experience level. There can be crosswinds on the descent, which is really going to be the most sketchy portion for any sort of crosswind. So really think mostly about that front wheel depth, and stronger and more experienced riders and bike handlers will still benefit from a rear disc wheel, but you want to err on the side of your comfort level. If you're going to be just sitting up fighting the bike the entire race, that's not going to be faster by any means. In terms of pacing, so usually what we recommend for an Ironman is sort of like a U-shaped heart rate graph. So the heart rate's always a little bit higher for the first quarter of the race coming out of the water. Then we recommend just let that settle, kind of keep it pretty even, then drop a few beats in the middle half of the race, and then try to bring it back up about the final quarter of the race. Just with the terrain in Placid, this usually ends up being kind of more per lap than per the entire bike, just because you'll get the flatter downhill portions and then the uphill portions at the end. But ideally, you want to try to make that second loop heart rate about 2 to 3 beats higher than the first if you're using that as your pacing metric. As for power, you want to try to meter out the power evenly on flats and gradual hills and contain it on the climbs. Use your gears, don't be grinding it 55 RPM if you've got more gears to go. On slight downhills or tailwinds, kind of keep it a little bit under goal power. On headwinds or slight uphills, you can be about 5 to 10 watts over per goal power. Try to, in a full Ironman, try to keep your climbs capped at about 50 watts over your expected Ironman power. For most of the course, it's probably possible to keep this even more within 20 to 30 watts. Probably, that 50 watts would be more some of the steeper portions, like initially coming up 86 and on the new loop. As for a lot of the climbing, the final 11 miles, you can cap it a little bit lower. I find it more helpful to look at normalized power on this course, just because the descents will knock down average power so much. So don't try to make up for the descent, just kind of settle back into your goal power. Don't try to go, 50 watts over to try to bring the average power up. Pace overall, it's going to be affected by the wind. It's going to be affected by the climbing and the weather. This is it's a hard course to really chase pace on, because you'll be pretty fast the first half of the 28 miles of each loop, and then it will all kind of be much slower the second half. So that's totally normal. RPE wise, kind of this moderate, about 5 to 7 on a scale of 10 is where you want to be aiming, especially depending on your experience level and your training and your durability. And then just some of the sticking points, or some of the points that can be a little bit low on the course. So the first loop, one of the sticking points is all the climbs, just in general, not overdoing them. It's very, very easy, coming up from Wilmington on the first loop to kind of overcook it. It doesn't really feel that bad at first. It's getting a nice position break on some of the climbs sitting up. So don't overdo it there. It always catches up with you the second lap. Another place that can be a little bit of a low moment is just kind of leaving town to start the second loop, because you kind of go through, you see your family, you see your friends, there's all these people cheering, there's all this energy, you know, you get the little stop at special needs if you're stopping there, and then you leave town and it's quiet, and then you realize you still have half the bike to go and you have to hit the climb again. So it can be kind of a low moment. So just be prepared mentally for that to kind of be a little bit of a sticking point. Another sticking point can be kind of once you get to the bottom of the descent, especially on that second loop, it's, you know, you get this nice break and you're kind of relieved that you made it down the descent in one piece, but then you realize there's still, you know, another 40 miles of riding, mostly uphill, and it can take a, you know, few minutes to kind of find the legs again once you've been coasting for that long as well. So just give it a little bit of time to work back in at that point. And then again, those final like 10 to 15 miles, if you have overdone other portions of the ride, those can be very painful. And even if you haven't, you know, that's just, it takes a while. It feels like it takes so much longer the second lap and you're, you know, climbing indefinitely, but it will end. Just keep going. All right, so our race day penalties and rules. Ironman recently issued the 2025 competition rules. Review the athlete guide carefully and details at ironman.com. One of the changes in the rules for this year is that a drafting violation, which is a blue card, has been reduced to a 3-minute penalty. So you must keep at least 6 bike lengths between your bike's front wheel and the rear wheel of the cyclist in front of you. And when you go to pass, you have to pass on the left and complete within 25 seconds. If you are passed, the person who passing you is going faster than you, you have to make immediate and constant rear progress. So you can't sit on that person's wheel. This is a course where, you know, riders will have different strengths and weaknesses. You might go back and forth with the same person a few times, but you can't just stick on their wheel if they pass you. You have to drop back first. If you get 3 violations, you'll get a red card, which is a disqualification. And another big one is if a official comes up to you, shows you the cards as your number, you have to stop at the next penalty tent. You can't pick and choose where you want to stop. If you don't stop at the next penalty tent, you'll end up disqualified. Another blue card violation is a littering violation. So that's if you intentionally, you know, take a bottle off your bike and chuck it, take a gel wrapper, chuck it, not at an aid station litter zone, then you'll get a blue card. A yellow card, which is the 60-second penalty, is for blocking. So this is if you're riding to the left of the lane. I mean, obviously, if there's some like defect in the road, you need to move over for a little bit, that's fine. But otherwise, stay right as far as you can safely. Otherwise, you can get a blocking violation. When you are on the bike, you have to have your chin strap fastened. So it's a good idea, just, you know, have your helmet on, have it fastened until you re-rack your bike or hand off your bike and going into transition. You cannot have cell phones, MP3 players, etc., used in a distractive manner on the course. So you can't be taking phone calls, you can't be riding along texting, you can't be taking selfies or videos, and you cannot be listening to music, no headphones, nothing, none of that. You can, if you have your cell phone on you on the bike, it kind of just has to be discreet, not being used actively on the course. You cannot have outside assistance. So on the run course, you can't have someone, the coach, you know, spouse, no one can be running or riding alongside you. They can't be, you know, spraying you with water or handing out nutrition. There's people who've gotten disqualified for having their spouse hand them chapstick. So none of that. You can unzip your top, but the zipper must be connected at the bottom and the top should be over the shoulders. You're supposed to zip up for the finish line. If you don't remember, nothing happens. I've forgotten plenty of times, but you're supposed to zip up for the finish line. Females, males if you want to as well, can wear sports bras. If that's the case, you just need to fully unzip your top. You need to roll up the top and tuck it into your shorts and then can run in the sports bra like that. Or if it's a 2-piece, you could just take the top off. You cannot cross the finish line with non-racers, so no kids, no family, none of that. One of the newer rules, Ironman is now following World Athletics rules on shoes. So the stack height of the shoe cannot be more than 40 millimeters, and it cannot have more than 1 rigid plate. So the 40 millimeters max is, there's a list on the Ironman website of prohibited shoes, but it's not all inclusive of all shoes with over 40 millimeters max stack height. These kind of maximal shoes have kind of exploded over the past few years. So If you are in doubt, now is a good time to just kind of go on the manufacturer of your shoe, look it up, look up what the stack height is, and make sure that's legal. This probably won't be super enforced on age groupers at this time, since it's probably going to be more looked at with pros, but it's a good idea to kind of get used to following the rules here. So some of the other new rules for this year have to do with water bottles and hydration systems and fairings. So there's a lot of words on here, but what you need to know is that on your front mounted water bottles, you can't have more than 2 liters mounted to the front of your bike. This doesn't include hydration systems that are inside the integrated into the bike itself, or ones that are inside the frame triangle. So it doesn't include like down tube bottles or seat tube bottles, just includes kind of like these between the arms bottles. You know, I've seen, this is kind of quote unquote called the Joe Skipper rule of these pros that have had these crazy front hydration setups that are basically fairings with, 5 bottles. So you can't have more than 2 liters on the front of the bike. And same thing on for rear mounted water bottles now. The current rule is you can't have more than 2 rear mounted water bottles, and they cannot be more than 1 liter capacity per bottle. Again, that excludes water bottles within the frame. It doesn't include any sort of like shadow box or anything to hold a flat kit on the back of the bike. It's just you can't have more than 2 water bottles. Another new rule is the aero bar extensions must not extend beyond the leading edge of the front wheel. Most bikes are fine with that. Just kind of double check. And then any sort of additional equipment that is sort of deemed to be added to the bike with the sole purpose of reducing wind resistance can get penalized for that. So this can include things like, don't be going out 3D printing something crazy for your aero bars and sticking in between them as a fairing. Just, it's again, a little bit of a gray area with the way the rules are written right now. It's probably not going to be super enforced on age groupers, but just, stick to what's on your bike. You can have some duct tape covering the whole of a disc wheel. That's fine. But, don't be adding crazy things to your aerodynamic assemblies to your bike. All right, so moving on to our run course. So our run course, I've got kind of a couple like downhill sections with some flat in between them. Then you've got some kind of relatively flat, slightly rolling sections. Then you kind of come back up what you went down, and then you'll do these sort of out and backs that have a little bit more up and down to them. So it's 2 loops. It's got, kind of 3 out and back sections. You'll kind of come down Main Street. You'll run down Route 73/Sentinel Road. You'll do an out and back on River Road, come back up. You'll do kind of this. This was, again, something that was added last year. They cut off some River Road and added this little out and back on Route 86. And then you'll do an out and back on Mirror Lake Drive, head down and repeat. It's a mix of sun and shade in various portions of this course. And again, it's about 600 to 700 feet of elevation gain per loop. It's a hilly run course. All right, so our first section of the run course is sort of this transition to River Road. It's, these first couple of miles, you'll come straight out of transition into this nice steep downhill quad busting here. You'll either feel like $1 million or you won't feel great. Either one's probably a lie. It's not going to how you're going to feel the whole run. You'll kind of notice a little bit of like uphill, kind of relatively flat through here. And then you'll come back down more of a hill to River Road, kind of coming past the horse show grounds here. And then you'll turn onto River Road and do an out and back. So that's kind of this section here. It's a bit under 2.5 miles total. It's kind of relatively flat to gently rolling. It's not completely flat, so don't go in with the expectation that it's pancake flat, but be prepared. There's a couple little gentle inclines in there, nothing crazy, but you'll just, if you think it's going to be completely flat, you will be disappointed. It's quiet through here. It's very, very pretty. It's got, again, nice views of the river. It can get very, very muggy and stagnant. I think it was a couple of years ago. It just randomly poured for 5 minutes, and then there was steam coming up off a river road after that. So that was really not the most pleasant situation in the world. There's some portions, kind of especially early on, that are super sunny. As you get further down, you get some shady portions as well. And once you come back up River Road, you'll turn and come back up Sentinel / Cascade, whatever you want to call it, Route 73 up to Main Street. This is going to include a couple of punchier sections. So you'll get the punchy section initially coming up off of River Road. You'll get this nice kind of flatter reprieve. And then you'll get this steep portion coming up this kind of right through here up to 73 to Main Street. There's great cloud support here, but it's easy to get carried away, you know, especially because this is kind of a very, very tough section of the course here. All right, so then once you get up this kind of steep, punchy section, then you hit our out and backs. So you used to just go straight further up Main Street here. Now you make this turn and do this little out and back on Route 86. It's about 0.9 miles out each way. You get a little bit of a downhill now, like very, very brief, like a minute and a half coming down here. And then you get this kind of soul crushing gradual uphill out to this out and back. It's not the most fun portion of the race to run. It's kind of, you know, if you're having a good day, it's fine. If you're not having a good day, it takes a very long time and, you know, it gets pretty rough, but then you get to U-turn and you come back down, which is a nice break from just kind of constant climbing the way the course used to be. And then you'll kind of you'll come up this steep portion onto Main Street here again, which will be a lot of crowd support. And then you'll turn into, sorry, the dog, and out and back on Mirror Lake Drive here, which is a little bit kind of, you know, it's relatively flat to slightly uphill until you make the turn, and you'll come back down and go past special needs. And then you will repeat it all. Second loop though, you'll get to make the turn and come around the Olympic Oval. There's, you know, a couple portions here where when you turn into the Olympic Oval, that it's just to get this like kind of nice quiet before you turn onto the oval and you have all the people cheering. So soak it all in there, you know, think about what you're about to accomplish. All right, so some pictures for the run course. So this is kind of, excuse me for a second, I'm just gonna shut the door. Okay, so initially coming out of transition, this is coming down Main Street to make the turn onto 73. You get this steeper portion kind of coming downhill. It's a little bit quad busting. This portion is coming back up towards town, up towards Main Street. This is the sort of your steep Sentinel Road hill. This is probably the steepest run section of the course. This is the early portion of River Road here, so it's pretty flat, it's pretty open, it's pretty sunny. And then you get this awesome best part of the race coming into the Olympic Oval. All right, in terms of our run fueling, aid stations are about every mile. Again, they'll have water and mortal hydration. The run will also have cola, they'll have bars, they'll have chips, pretzels, bananas, and oranges. And again, on top of the Morton gels, they'll have ice and sponges to cool off with. You can also carry your own, and again, check the athlete guide for final nutrition details. In terms of run race day pacing, so for the vast majority of athletes, you want to kind of start off, maybe not right off the bat because you're coming downhill, but take a look at your bike average heart rate at about 5 to 10 beats per minute, just depending on your personal kind of strengths and weaknesses, and try to settle into that after you get down that first initial steep downhill. Once you get to the flatter portion, settle into that. If you are using like a stride or run power meter, try to stay as even as possible and try to keep the second half as close to the first as possible. It's an Ironman. There's going to be drop off no matter what you do, based on your physiology and durability training. Don't overdo the downhill out of transition, and the steeper sections, there's no harm in walking them. And a lot of times it ends up being a better strategy. I think I figured out with an athlete a couple of years ago that walking up that Sentinel Road steep uphill, it's, you know, maybe like a quarter mile, and you lose maybe like 30 seconds walking it versus running it, which you probably will make up later in the race if you're not spiking your heart rate and grinding your muscles down. Pace wise, you'll be faster than your goal pace out of transition, but don't go crazy. You know, don't try to make up a ton of space, because you can, if you're not used to running downhills, especially, that will shred your quads. Settle and so save those quads. settle in sort of on that. Once you get down the initial, when 73 flattens out, that's a good portion to settle in. And also River Road's a good section to settle in. You want to try to maintain the effort and the heart rate as consistently as possible once you start going through some of the hillier sections. Heart rate's going to rise uphill, it will drop downhill, but try to keep it within about 5 to 10 beats of average. RPE wise, you want to keep it about a 5 to 7 on a scale of 10. Pace wise, usually usually I would say for a good Ironman, you want to have your slowest mile be within a minute per mile of your fastest. This isn't necessarily going to be the case on this course just because of the variation in terrain. So that can just be sort of a guideline from lap to lap. Right. In terms of mental fitness, so if we already touched upon, make those goals your number one priority. So again, that's your attitude and your fueling plan, and then managing your effort and how you respond to things on the course. That's the one, the few things you have 100% control over in an Ironman. Secondly, focus on your targets, focus on your power, your pace, your heart rate, adjust as needed based on how you're feeling on the day. Stick to the plan, including how do you react when something doesn't go according to plan. So, if you're not hitting your power numbers, how are you going to react? If somebody passes you and slows down, how are you going to react? If you get a flat tire, how are you going to react? Outcomes should be left to the second half of the run, if at all. So this is, if you have your family member telling you what place you're in your age group, if you're chasing a certain time or world championship slots, then this is the time to kind of just use that to draw you along and motivate you to race. Be who you are and run your own bike and run and swim your own race plan, and show appreciation for your spectators, for your family, for volunteers, for your friends along the way. So just kind of a side note that this picture was me in a mood before the race, and it showed on the race course. So, have your mental fitness ready. In terms of our timing cutoffs, so our timing cutoffs are going to be 17 hours to complete the entire race once you cross the starting mat at the swim start. Anyone who doesn't complete the event in 17 hours will be designated as a DNF. Obviously, aid stations, transitions, etc., all included. The swim course closes 2 hours and 20 minutes after the last athlete enters the water. Each individual athlete has 2 hours and 20 minutes to complete the swim. So you get in the water, you have 2 hours and 20 minutes. If you take it longer than that, you will receive a DNF. Ironman officials can take you off the course. T1 will close 10 minutes after the swim course closes. So if you are one of the later starters in the swim course and don't spend forever in T1, that will close. The bike course closes 10 hours and 30 minutes after the last athlete enters the water. Each athlete has 10 hours and 30 minutes to complete the swim, T1, and the bike course total. Any athlete that takes longer than this will receive a DNF and won't be allowed to head out on the run course. T2 closes 10 minutes after the bike course cutoff. So there are a couple of intermediate bike cutoffs. So you have to pass behind the high school to start the second lap by 1:30 p.m. So this is about 7 to 7.5 hours into the race, depending on what time you get to the water. That's a hard cutoff. If you're not past this, you will receive a DNF. And then you also need to make it past aid station 4, which there is something in my way right now. There we go. By 4:45 p.m. So this is about, the Hungry Trout is about 100 miles into the bike course. So again, that's a hard time cutoff. You have to make it past that point by 4:45 p.m. All right, so run course, again, you have 17 hours to complete the run course. If you take longer than that, you'll receive a DNF. Intermediate run cutoff is you have to start the second loop by 9 p.m. So you have to pass by the town hall by 9 p.m. All right. In terms of spectators, so those family and friends coming along to watch you, best way to kind of follow where you are in the race course is the Ironman Athlete Tracking app. Can kind of have them go to some pre-agreed locations along the course so you know where they are. For Lake Placid, it's possible to catch a quick quick glimpse of you between laps. You can also kind of sit up on the hill by the swim start and have a nice view of the full swim course. You might not be able to pick out your individual athlete, but it's kind of a cool place to watch. And then if somebody wants to catch you specifically, they can hang out on the run from the lake to transition. It's a pretty long run, so they can catch you there. On the bike, you can catch your athlete initially out of transition. Usually there's some spectators kind of going down Route 73 out of town. Most popular place is at the end of the first lap and start of the second. So coming up Papa Bear, there's always a lot of spectators lining that whole sort of Mirror Lake Drive, Parkside, Main Street, the stretch through town. There's always a lot of spectators. And I like kind of going up behind the high school here by special needs. That can be a good place to catch your athlete that's a little bit quieter. You get a little bit of the uphill, you get the special needs stuff. So if you want to specifically catch somebody, that can be a good place as well. That's sort of not quite as popular, but a little bit quieter. On the run, there's ton of places for your family and friends to see you. You know, you're going back and forth on 73 multiple times. Sentinel Hill is always very popular. There's the 86 out and back. There's sort of this kind of hot corner now at Sentinel and Main, where there's obviously multiple out and backs going through there that people can see you, you know, 6 times in a single lap, for better or worse, depending on how you're feeling. But that can be a very, very good place for people to see you quite often. There is time to get, if someone wants to catch you kind of coming up Main Street to go to the final out and back on Mirror Lake Drive one more time, there's plenty of time for them to catch you at that, you know, like mile 24-ish, 23, 24-ish mark, and then get to the Olympic Oval to see your finish. I've many times, you know, power walked to catch athletes in the oval and then gotten there, and there's still like, you know, 5 minutes later on the course. So there's plenty of time there. Post race gear checkout is from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. If you're, you know, usually we'll go a little bit past that because obviously there's going to be finishers around 12 a.m. You have to have either your athlete wristband, or if your family is getting your gear, they'll have to have your bike checkout ticket. If you're able, if you're up to it and feeling okay, come back out to cheer. We'll have for our QT2 athletes, we'll have our QT2 tent set up at the Devlin. Breakfast and slot allocation and awards will be the following day on Monday. Breakfast starts at 8:30 a.m. At 9 a.m. awards and roll downs will start. So be there. And those will be at the horse show ground. So you'll run past it on the run course. That's a little bit down outside of town on Route 73. You know, if you want seating, try to get there early because it tends to fill up. Slot wise, there are going to be 45 Kona slots for women and 85 knee slots for men. So men in particular, if you have any desire to race in knees, I would go to awards because those are going to roll down a lot. I have a feeling it's late in the qualification schedule, and that's a lot of slots. Again, morning clothes bag pickup. Like I said, this is one of the races you can get your morning clothes bag afterwards. So those will be just kind of sitting at the same places you drop them off where special needs are. Again, they're not going to be policed overnight, but no one's really going to go through them to take your like nasty socks you switched out halfway through. So if you want your stuff back, go back and grab those bags. And then again, support the local community. Consider shopping at local shops, stop at restaurants. There's a lot of cool Ironman souvenirs. You know, be courteous, tip well, make someone's day better. There's always, you know, the vocal minority that don't like Ironman there, but the majority of people, you know, if you treat them well, they will treat you well back, and they will want the race here. And get out and explore a little bit. There's just, you know, very, very beautiful area. There's a lot of like beautiful places to, even if you're kind of limping around post race, there's a lot of beautiful places to go and look around. I think last year we found somewhere to sit by the river and just stick our legs in, and it felt amazing. So, you know, get out, explore, see this beautiful area. All right, and if anyone has any questions, you can type them in now, or that's my contact information, email and Instagram handle. So feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Anyone have any questions for Jennie they want to raise while she's here live with you? All right, always a sign of a good presentation. So this was recorded. It'll be up on the YouTube channel. And if you do have any questions, you can either just reach out to Jennie in her email, or you can always post them right in the YouTube channel as well. And we'll have her get back to you. Thanks, Jennie.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, have a great night, everyone.